Erev Limud. Nice to have you here. And we're going to complete our 4-session series this evening. Looking forward to it. And just a reminder that if you want to go back and see any of the presentations, they'll be on our website. And they're there for viewing, or you can suggest other people who weren't able to be at all the classes, access the website and review that. So without further ado, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, and it's wonderful. I guess that's a reminder for cell phones. It's wonderful to see everybody here, especially given the weather. So I'd like to begin by saying Shalom and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, that the Almighty, the truth belongs, those who are pure in word, thought, and deed, the Khalsa, belong to the Almighty Creator, and true victory belongs to the Almighty Creator. So today, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the concept of the Divine Feminine. And it's a really interesting concept because as I go around and sometimes when I participate in the interfaith communities, I actually get a lot of questions with regards to women and what is the status of women in this religion. And I have done some interfaith sessions at the University of Calgary where they talk directly with regards to the status of women. And so I think it's a very important topic. And so what I'm going to do in this talk is talk a little bit about the status of women in the religion, and then the concept of divine feminine within the religion, within the philosophy, and within the practice. And then I'm going to actually take the liberty to extrapolate that concept of divine feminine as it sort of manifests in all women. So I'd like to broaden it out to the global perspective as well. So this is going to be an interesting journey, so let's enjoy it together. So the divine feminine, in a quotation by Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he says in the scriptures in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and remember these are our supreme authority and the highest authority for our souls. From a woman, man is born. Within a woman, man is conceived. And to a woman, man is engaged and married. Through the woman, the future generations are conceived. Then why call her inferior when it is woman who gives birth to all mankind, even the kings? And Guru Nanak stated this hymn, and I've actually just condensed it down to take out some salient points, to comment on the socio-political situation of women that he saw in the Indian subcontinent at the time. So this is, remember, about 500 years ago. And this hymn is actually sung in all gurdwaras around the world in the early hours of the morning in a scripture called Asadivar. And the big gurdwaras, and especially at the Golden Temple, it is sung every single morning. And it reminds us of how greatly Guru Nanak felt that women's status and authority must be declared, and must be declared and kept in the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib Ji as the philosophy by which we should approach women. And most of the time, the ragis or the special musicians that sing it are male. And it's interesting that the men have to sing this, and they have to own that as well. And it is also very interesting in my discourses and talks with other interfaith that I don't believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe that in any other religion in their scriptures is the status of women addressed so directly. And it is directly addressed and talked about, and then also we can't change that either. Now, whether or not that's put into practice, practically, that's a different matter, but the philosophy is there. So when we talk about the divine feminine, I'd like to challenge everybody that all the avatars, and we have that movie called Avatar, and it's actually, the word is avatar, and those were the human masters, the supreme human masters that came onto the earth, that incarnated. All of those masters, whether it be Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Guru Nanak, Ram, Moses, any of the supreme masters, they all incarnated through the womb of a woman. And even if you draw and extrapolate that further, even with the Immaculate Conception of Christ, still Christ needed the vehicle of a woman to take birth, and Mother Mary was so important. So, with regards to Sikhs and the status of women, there was the equal status of women was established, so around 500 years ago in the Sikh religion, and that was established even prior to women being given the right to vote in the North American continent, and even in Britain as well, too. And so that's really important because the Gurus actually had sort of that foresight to sort of say, okay, this is an issue and we need to deal with it. And many of the Sikh Gurus addressed the status of women at the time. And I'm just going to go through what each of the Gurus talked about. So the first Guru was Sri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and his commentary was based on the social situation that he saw at the time, where, remember, Sikhism is a minority religion in India, and at that time, the majority Hindus and Muslims, the women were not given the equal rights. They were not treated in the same manner. Oftentimes, women actually had to eat and pray in different locations from the men. And even sometimes, women were barred from even praying or meditating. So, he made that social commentary at the time of extreme oppression that he actually saw. The second Guru, Guru Angad Dev Ji, he really stressed education of women. And nowadays, in modern times, we understand and we look to the prosperity of the community based on the education level of the women. And we look at that, and there's a lot of development of this idea in the African subcontinent, in areas where, in some of the third world areas as well, where they're looking to even microfinancing, the women are in charge. If a woman is educated, then her entire family can be educated. So that philosophy, Guru Angad Dev Ji, our second Guru, approached that. The third Guru, Guru Amar Das Ji, he was one of the eldest in age, and he disallowed the practice of sati. And so sati is a practice predominantly from the Hindu tradition, and that was a practice that if your husband passed away, in order for you to have true love, or sat means truth, to have that true marriage, then the woman would also burn herself in the funeral pyre as well. And so Guru Amar Das Ji said, no, we're going to not do that. That's not appropriate. So he disallowed it in the Sikh congregations. And moreover, a woman then would be widowed. And in some circles, if the woman didn't complete the practice of sati, then she was a widowed woman. And as a widower, she was shunned from oftentimes relatives or society at large. So Guru Amar Das Ji distinctly even said that women who are widowed should be allowed to remarry. And this is a quote from the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji by Guru Amar Das. And he says, Sati, so Sati means truth, and that true love. Satis are not those who are burnt with their husbands, O Nanak. True satis are those who die from the pangs of separation from the divine. Those are considered satis who live contented, embellish themselves with good conduct, and cherish the Lord ever and call on Him. So that was Guru Amar Das Ji's context of how he viewed the true love and that union as well. Guru Amar Das Ji did another really great thing, which was unique at the time, and he established the Manjis. And what Manjis were, it's almost like they were diasporas, kind of, or dioceses actually. And they were established seats of authority from which you could organize, you could collaborate, you could teach, and you could do kind of parish work about Sikhism. And when he established 33 Manjis, and when he established those, the authority of those specific Manjis was given to the women, because he understood that from the woman there is that idea of the carrying forward the belief system, the values, and the education of the family. So Guru Ram Das Ji, the fourth Guru, he wrote the Lama, which last week we talked a little bit about, the wedding song. And in that, he established the equality, the equal role of a woman and a man in marriage. So the equal role, we talked about the 4 rounds being practicing, then experiencing, then realizing, and then having union. So he talked about the equal responsibility of both partners in that whole process as well. Guru Arjan Dev Ji, he is our 5th Guru. And Guru Arjan Dev Ji commented by acknowledging the Divine Mother, or the Divine Feminine, is the true first spiritual teacher. So he says in the scriptures, Gurudev Mata, Gurudev Pita, Gurudev Swami, Parmeshwara, that the Divine Guru is my mother. And remember, Guru is that teacher or that divine illumination that gives you wisdom. So he could have said it's the father first, but he actually chose to say the mother first. The 6th Guru, Guru Hargobind, he declared, and he is the one who set up the throne of spiritual and temporal authority. So he's also called the master of median pity. And he declared that women should be considered the very conscience of man. And then we get to the 10th master, the 10th Sikh Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And he created, when he created the baptismal ceremony, or what we would equate to a baptismal ceremony, he created the Khalsa, and he said that the Khalsa is to remain genderless. So that women could be baptized and given the name Kaur, which means lioness or princess. So again, we talked about this a little bit in the past, but all women, once they become baptized, get the name Kaur. All men get the name Singh, whether or not they take it as their last name or their middle name, but it's always there. And Kaur means lioness or princess, Singh means lion. The 10th Guru also, he commented about marriage, and at that time, there was, from the Muslim perspective, there was the idea or the concept that you could have multiple wives. And Guru Gobind Singh actually commented and said that the marriage is between one man and one woman, not multiple wives. And even Guru Gobind Singh went so far in the Dasam Granth in his own writings to say that when you see a woman who is younger than you, she is your daughter. When she is your age, she is your sister. When she is older than you, she is your mother. And you should remain focused with your relationship to one woman, and don't even dream about another woman, even in your dreams. So he was very direct in that discussion. So when we look at the divine and Kaur, so I'm looking at the divine Sikh woman as Khalsa, as being baptized. It is a personal choice where you have adult baptism, and women wear all 5 articles of faith, just like the men do. And when a female, Sikh female, becomes baptized, she becomes part of the Khalsa, and Khalsa is genderless. And so this is really important because in many traditions, women can't wear the same clothes as men or the same articles of faith as men, or nor can they achieve ministerial status. And sometimes, like I talked about before, sometimes women are not even allowed to pray in the same location as men are. So Guru Gobind Singh, in his wisdom, went to a concept beyond sex and gender, and he elevated it to the caliber of consciousness and said that purity is purity of word, thought, and deed, and a human is a human, and so took it beyond gender. Now, in understanding the divine feminine, Guru Gobind Singh then took it to another level, which is really unique, because as Sikhs, we worship the sword. We worship Shastra. Shastra means sword or weapon. And we worship it. And the reason we worship it is because Guru Gobind Singh established that the Shastra, or the sword, is the divine power of the Almighty. And so it is the divine, and also he gave it an attribute, and gave it that attribute of the feminine energy. So he references the Shastra, or the sword, as the divine feminine energy. It's also called Bhagavati. And oftentimes there will be some confusion or some in dialogue between Hindus and Sikhs, and Hindus will say Bhagavati is reference to our goddess Durga. And from a Sikh perspective, Guru Gobind Singh was very clear in his writings that he denotes Bhagavati to mean the divine feminine sword. Even to the fact that he said to the Sikhs after he passed, some Sikhs were asking him before he passed, that Guru Gobind Singh Ji, if we ever wanted to see you, how should we see you? And he said, if you set an altar and you place the Shastras, 5 of the Shastras or 5 weapons there, in the reflection of that I shall be. So that's how he revered the sword and Shastra. So when we do our formal ardas in the Gurdwaras, or at the end of our prayers in the morning, we stand with our hands in prayer pose, and we remember first, the ardas is written, actually the first stanzas are written by Guru Gobind Singh, and he says, first we remember the primal power, and that is Bhagavati, the divine feminine. And then we remember Guru Nanak and Guru Angad, and then all the gurus are listed as well. In his writings, Guru Gobind Singh salutes Ik Onkar Se Bhagavati Ji Sahai, that with the grace of the divine feminine energy, I am powerful. So that's how he references Bhagavati. So in the divine feminine perspective, as a Sikh, we worship the formless God. And then if you extrapolate that further, only woman has the ability to create, like the divine God faculty of creation. And so therefore, part of that faculty of creation is the divine faculty of the divine feminine. And the divine feminine has a natural instinctive power, and something that is so strong that we all know as mothers, if your child is crying a country away or a city away or rooms away, and a breastfeeding mother, her milk, she'll start lactating on her own. And that's part of that instinctual nature that the divine feminine has, that ability to connect. And this is something that men can also have, but they need to meditate to create that, or to manifest that. It's part of the balance of male and female, but also mothers and women have been given that instinctive ability. And in yogic circles, that's actually called or told to be 16 times more powerful. That's the mother's intuition, the mother's sense, the female intuition of knowing what's going to happen or what needs to happen or protecting. So the divine core, or the divine feminine, in Sikh scriptures has been called Adi Shakti, has been called Pritham Bhagavati, has been called Sarva Shakti, has been called Kundalini Mata Shakti. So different names for the divine feminine as well. So if you're a divine Sikh, if you're a divine Sikh core, what does that mean? Because I remember I'm going to extrapolate this out as well too, to everybody. So you have the ability to be divine, or you have the ability to not be divine too. And so what is in our teachings is to be noble. And as a woman, noble is the greatest virtue that you can have. That if you can be noble and live your truth, live your grace, live your radiance, live your sacredness, that all these qualities will give you character, and that character gives you the capacity to be invincible. So, again, this concept of nobility is there because when we look at women, sometimes women choose to do a lot of different things. So a woman can be spiritual, or a woman could be antisocial and corrupt. And so it's a choice that she makes. So even though the divine feminine resides within everyone, this is a personal choice. So that concept of being noble, that concept of being sacred, that concept of holding your own divine and radiating your own divine in everything you do, in that caliber of consciousness, in the purity of your word, thought, and deed is of utmost importance. So this is a concept of the divine core. When a woman conceives any idea, it grows, and her mind becomes pregnant with that idea. Now, this is not just talking about physical, this is talking about the mental. So the mind becomes pregnant with that idea. A woman will deliver no matter what the pain. So that's true in pregnancy. So this is a very physical concept, but it is also a mental concept. Because the projective power of prayer, of the maternal or the mother, and it doesn't mean that it has to be a physical mother, that projective power of prayer can then take an idea and manifest it. And so that's what this is speaking to. And this is a quotation taken from one of our contemporary Sikh leaders who actually focused a lot of his teachings on the divine feminine and on women as well. So technically, or technologically, that's even a better word, as a woman, we've been given the God-given faculty, and we have the capacity to nurture and deliver. And that capacity comes in because of that intuitive nature that the woman instinctively has. So what is the teaching to the divine core? So be your own disciple and conquer your mind and act via your neutral mind. Meaning that you have a positive mind, you have a negative mind, you have to balance out the risk and then act very neutrally. Know that every action has a reaction, and for a woman it's 16 times more. Because everything is in balance. If you have 16 times more the intuitive ability, you also have the ability to damage yourself even 16 times more. If you are incomplete or not ready, then you are 16 times more vulnerable. If you have not contained yourself with your values, with your sacredness, with your commitment, then you can be vulnerable. And you will have to pay for that as well as a woman. So our message from Sikhs, our message to the divine Sikhs or the divine core is that to remind the women that you are the grace of God. You are the strength of your family. You are the daughter of the Guru, of the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib or of all the 10 Gurus. And you are the vehicle for all creation. You are that primal power. And when you empower somebody, when you empower a young woman and you give her that mandate, it's amazing what she can achieve. Also in this concept is the concept of if a woman chooses to go the negative path. So this is actually a quotation from Yogiji as well. When a woman falls, divinity falls. But when a woman falls, generations fall. But when a woman rises, God rises. And this speaks to a concept of Jadvikala. So Jadvikala is the ever-rising exaltedness of the formless Lord that we can't place a limit on. And when a woman is empowered with education, with her proper status, with her proper nutrition, with proper rights, then she can pass on that wisdom, pass on the teachings, pass on that blessing to all her family, and then generations benefit from that. But when a woman prostitutes herself, that could be mentally, physically, however, emotionally, then she loses that and falls. And that divinity within her falls as well too. So that's what this is speaking to. So as the divine feminine, there are some challenges that we have as Sikhs as well. And some of the challenges that we do have are Sikhs are a minority in India. So even though the Gurus taught this, how does a minority practice this and maintain that practice? And that is a big issue that Sikh women have in India because you look at the societal global pressures and you look at the pervasiveness of the patriarchal family, and then you kind of get told and put back in your place. However, with the Sikh diaspora all over the world, that actually has changed quite significantly. And women have that sense of empowerment, and they have that ability and also education as well, where they're able to now realize that divinity and realize that power, and now are actually grabbing the baton, so to speak, and moving forward. But it is something that we need to continually work on. And we're fighting against established routines, the norm. And there is fear. Even there's fear of change. Sometimes we have tried to change things at a very high level, and there's fear, not just from the men, there's fear from some of the elderly women too, the seniors, because it's been that way, so that's way it's going to stay that way forever. So there is that thought, but that should not limit us, and we're all trying to push for the true caliber of women to be realized. So what is the legacy of a divine core? So I'd like to postulate that the legacy is, whether or not you're a Sikh, whether or not you're Amritdhari, whether or not you're a non-baptized Sikh, whether or not you're religious of any faith, whether or not you're, whatever your belief system may be, that as a woman, all women are divine, and all women carry that grace of the divine feminine. And it behooves all of us to support that, because we know through our history that when a woman is supported, when a woman is educated, when a woman is treated as equal, we have a better place, a better earth, a better humanity as well too. So I'd like to extrapolate this all to the divine feminine from the Sikh perspective is acknowledging the grace and the spirituality in all women. And it really speaks to the heart of the matter, because at any time a woman can conceive a soul that may be great that may be spiritually exalted, that may become a ruler or a leader or a prime minister or maybe a superstar in whatever realm. And so that could be the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor, or it could be the richest of the rich. But it's that awareness and that caliber of consciousness within that woman where she takes that idea, conceives it, and manifests it. And when we look at the word God, you look at the word God, it's G, generating, then it's O, organizing, then it's D, destroying. Generating, organizing, and destroying power. And if you look at that, there is a scripture from the Sikh scripture that talks about the whole idea that if you want to ruin yourself, and this is talking directly about the divine feminine, if the Almighty wants to ruin somebody, they take away their kindness, they take away their compassion, they take away their truth. And women, between us, okay, so we are divine feminine, but that also means that as women, we need to respect each other. Because when we slander, or when we gossip, or when we do things and talk badly about each other, then we lower ourselves as well. And if we exalt each other and the divine feminine within each other, we breathe the love, the truth, the compassion to actually help our earth and help our humanity as well too. So the responsibility is not that we're all blaming everything on the guys. No, the responsibility also lies internally as well. And so the divine feminine resides within all of us. And a man who is very meditative and has awakened the right hemisphere of his brain, they actually have the ability to tap into the divine feminine as well. Because as Sikhs, we believe that as human beings, are created in the image of God, and we have that ability, all of us have that potential. It's a little bit easier when you have that mothering, instinctive self or sense. But also, as a male, you can definitely achieve that through meditation and prayer. So that brings a close to the concept of the divine feminine and the idea of the status of women in the Sikh religion. So I'm open to questions.
Could you explain power?
Could you go to the mic there, because it's for the people who are on the web who are watching. So, yes.
Could you explain why power, the divine power, is more important than other attributes, maybe of the divine?
Yeah, it's more in terms of saluting that, generating, organizing, and destroying. So it's looking at that concept of God and saluting that. So it's also a way of removing oneself from the misuse of that power as well. So power can be thought of as energy, and that energy is divine energy. But it is the divine energy and the divine will that runs the power as well. So it's really a reminder for man or woman to not get in their ego and misuse power. Because we think of power as temporal, but it's also referencing temporal, but also spiritual. The Sikh symbol, and if we go back, let's see. So the two animations that are going there, rotating, one is the kirpan, or the sword of spiritual power, and one is the sword of temporal power. And when they are in balance, you get the double-edged sword in the center. And when that is balanced, there's illumination. And that explains our Sikh symbol. So the Sikh symbol is called the Khanda or the Adi Shakti. Actually, the symbol is called Adi Shakti, which is also another word for the divine feminine. So Adi meaning primal, Shakti meaning power.
I just wanted to ask if you'd follow up a little bit about the status of Sikh women today.
Mm-hmm.
So, do Sikh women play prominent roles in Sikh communal life? Are they professionals as well as homemakers? What's a typical relationship between a married relationship in terms of the roles that the husband plays, the wife plays? Are they defined?
Right, okay. So just repeating the question for the webinar, the question was, what is the typical role that Sikh women play in day-to-day life now in regards to the community at large, in regards to profession, in regards to marital life, and what are their roles? So I would say that it really depends on the level of education of the woman, because when I was born, my mother was a principal, actually, in a school in India. So she was she came from a family of teachers. And so it really depends on the educational level. And from a professional level, then you can achieve whatever profession based on your education background. From a perspective, so I would say in modern day India now, you have a lot more Sikh women visible, Sikh women as politicians, Sikh women in the religious institutions. And then also from a perspective of on a very traditional basis, you also will see some Sikh women who stay at home and are just the homemakers. But in the gurdwaras, in the Sikh temples, oftentimes in midday, after all the chores are done, the Sikh women will gather and do Sukhmani Sahib, which is one of those prayers that I've talked about before, that takes about 40 to 60 minutes to recite. So all the women in the village would get together and sit and recite Sukhmani Sahib, Peace Lagoon, or the prayer for peace. So they have that perspective as well. With regards to marital life, it's really individual sort of basis. So you wouldn't say there's necessarily defined roles. It depends on that individual couple in terms of how they run things. I would say that within the diaspora that's abroad, it's a little bit more equal. Within the diaspora that is in India, it's probably not as much, but a lot more women are actually educated and they're doing jobs. They are, they're holding IT jobs or teaching or different things. So we are definitely seeing, with the passage of time, women accepting more roles other than just being a mother. I missed you last week.
I'm making up for last week.
No problem.
So, are there writings by women? Because everything you quoted was from men.
Mm-hmm.
Men telling us,
right.
telling you and us about how women should be treated.
Right. Yeah.
And I always find that somewhat problematic in terms of women should be talking about women and writing about women.
Yeah. So the rabbi's question was with regards to the writings and the scriptures even, that all of the scriptures seem to be from men, and even the quotations I've taken are from men. At the time of the gurus, yes, it was all male gurus, and all the writings were from men. But you have to look, that was about 400 to 500 years ago, so at that time, women weren't even close to getting rights, equal rights. However, nowadays, and that's actually probably my fault, that in this presentation I didn't actually research or take some of my quotations from some of the Sikh women historians that there are, or the Sikh scholars that are female, because there are quite a few colleges and a lot of writings actually by women where they are talking about these contemporary issues and dealing with them as well too. And for example, I sit on the ministerial board of, so one of the quotations was from Yogi Ji, just to make his name short, Yogi Ji. And I sit on the international ministerial board for Sikh Dharma International. And we deal with all the religious issues of the time. And we have religious veto power over, decisions that are made based on how we apply the religious philosophy and those type of things as well. I also have ministerial rights as well. So that organization is a relatively new organization in the last 40, 50 years. And he looked at what was happening in North America in terms of how ministerial rights were important and ministerial credentials were important, and although Sikhs don't believe in proselytizing, he didn't say that we need to proselytize, but we need to actually have ministerial credentials. And so definitely women are a big part of that as well. If from a perspective, if I were to go to the Golden Temple, or when I go, I am treated with a lot of respect and regard from the other ministers that are there as well too. So it's a matter of your work and your effort, and the times definitely are changing.
Still up?
Yes.
Okay.
You've alluded to changes in the role of women over time. In a broader sense, how is Sikhism changing, and what do you foresee for the next 100 years?
From a perspective of the changes within Sikhism, I think I kind of think that the scriptural writings are actually quite modern. And they're very egalitarian as well, like they're equal. So so I don't see anything from that perspective changing. What I do see changing is the issue that we have being so distinct and maintaining our form and identity. So for Sikh children, maintaining their hair, and I do see. And not that I'm against anything for sure. I'm not against intermarriage. But with the intermarriage, then you see somewhat of a dilution sometimes of practices. And then you get worried, is that practice going to be maintained? So I think those are the issues as Sikhs we're facing more so. It's more with regards to Guru Gobind Singh gave us an identity and a form so unique that you stand out, and people don't like to stand out. And that's the interesting thing. In today's society, we believe that a businessman or entrepreneur, or let's say an athlete, somebody who's unique, who's distinct, they're, very valuable. But yet when it comes to expressing your religious beliefs and practicing your faith, if you're distinct or unique, society says, no, melt, mold. So I think that is the area that Sikhs, as we are facing the biggest challenge, is how do you encourage the youth when in those formative years, your identity, your base core self, how you see yourself is set, and how can you deal with societal pressures? And, if I look at it from my own perspective, growing up in Brooks, Alberta was not easy, in redneck Brooks, with the meat packing plant Lakesiders right there, and being a vegetarian, and my Hindu doctor telling me every time I saw him, you have to eat meat. And I was like, you don't understand. I'm not going to eat meat. That's not who I am. But, I stood out because I wasn't wearing a turban at the time. I stood out because of my skin color. And I was telling you at one of the sessions that, all I heard growing up was, Paki, go home. And it was just so disheartening just because of my color. And in my grade 1 class, you could count the minorities on your hand, one hand. I mean, they stood out. And so for me, growing up, to fit in was my biggest ordeal. I used to come home, grade 4, I'd come home to my mother at lunchtime, and I'd cry all lunchtime because I had no friends. Nobody wanted to be my friend because I had brown skin. And then it wasn't until junior high and high school where I started to fit in. But then, at that time, I started exploring my faith and my practice, and then I was not going to fit in at all. And that was a really big challenge for me. And it wasn't until my third year of my BSc, so my third year of my BSc, where I decided, when I was younger, when I was in grade 8, I believe, I must have been 13, 14, I had a vision of myself practicing medicine with a turban wearing white. I had a vision. And so I always knew that that's what's going to happen, but I didn't know when it was going to happen. And it wasn't until the third year of my BSc I kind of realized that who am I living my life for? For friends? Or am I living it for myself? And then I made the change. I decided to make the change. And it was really hard because the very first day I had to introduce myself to my prof, I was the only student. It was an independent study class. And she had seen me before. And then I walk in with a turban and all white, and her mouth dropped. It literally dropped because she couldn't recognize me. And then I remember sitting at the University of Calgary, walking from Library Tower to the science block, and at lunchtime, and seeing all the students that were sitting on the mound there, I felt like 300 pairs of eyes were watching me everywhere, I felt so, but I was like a beacon out there, a white beacon. And so I felt it was really hard. And every day, it took me 2 weeks, every day for 2 weeks as I'm tying my turban, and I'm like, is this really worth it? Is it really worth it? And then I realized I'm not tying my turban for I'm not living for anybody else. I'm living for who Harjot is. And I'm living to be a representative of Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Master. And he told me the turban is important. So it took me 2 weeks of tying my turban every day. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Going in the car, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And after 2 weeks, I kind of got it where I was okay. But, I had a lot of spiritual support. I had a lot of guidance. And I grew up with Yogi Ji as well. I met him when I was 12 years old, so he started empowering me from when time I was 12. So I had that guidance and that support. A lot of the kids don't have that. And so there is this issue of how do we give them that type of support. So what's happened is a lot of charter schools now, 6 charter schools are popping up in a lot of communities to deal with this issue so that that identity can be maintained. And oftentimes, parents will, it's the old adage where when you really want something, you'll behave, and once you get it, then you forget about the rules. So oftentimes parents, they haven't had a child or they want to have a male child. So they're praying, oh, we'll do this, they do whatever negotiations they do with the divine, right? And they get a child, and then oftentimes that child's hair is kept until the teenage years, or until that child says, well, my dad doesn't have his hair, so why should I have my hair? So we're facing a lot of issues that way. I think that's the biggest challenge we're going to have in the upcoming years.
So mentioning egalitarian and being modern, can you touch at all on gay issues?
Yeah, okay. Hot topic. So, talking about gay issues. So, from gay and lesbian issues. So, from a perspective, I suppose I should say that I should make no comment on that, according to what we, our supreme throne of authority, because they haven't made any ruling in that area. Does it happen? Yeah. And does it happen in Sikhs? Yes. And in India, it's very interesting. The Indian culture has adopted gay and lesbians differently, and there is a certain subset, you could call them a subset of people, that they just accept them, and it's just not made as big of a deal. And I think that from that perspective, that maybe that's why there hasn't been any particular ruling with regards to that. So from that perspective, that would be my Sikh perspective. As a perspective, as a physician, I don't judge. And as a Sikh, I don't judge. So you can take it from there.
So I'm just saying, I guess, sometimes people always quote the Bible and they'll say, you're not supposed to spill seed, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, is there anything in the teachings that say anything in particular that they kind of hang on to as this is what it says, so this is what we lean toward, or anything like that?
Other than...
Do you want to be written out of the book?
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny. I would hate to quote Pierre Trudeau, but we don't go into the bedrooms anyway. But I think that if you wanted to be hardlined, then you would say that Guru Gobind Singh said man and woman. So, but I don't know.
But then when you're saying that a human is a human, there's neutrality, man, woman.
I agree.
It's the same thing. Then it's kind of like, well, if you want to lean on that one.
Yeah, I agree. And so again, from a religious perspective, I really can't. All I can say is what the teachings are and how I view them. And how I view them is that we're all equal, right? Independent of race, gender, sex, creed, or sexuality. That would include sexuality as well. Again, that there hasn't been any particular ruling from the Government on that issue.
So a follow-up to that. So are there openly gay Sikhs in the community?
Yeah, I wouldn't say openly.
Okay.
I would say it's kind of like what happens in India, where there's a certain sect and they just are there, and everybody just kind of gets along. That you don't really broach that issue.
Okay. So what about women's reproductive rights? What about abortion, contraception?
Mm-hmm.
Where do women stand in terms of being able to make decisions for themselves?
Right. So that is usually an individual issue. And so we don't agree that we as Sikhs, we believe that you should use contraception. And you should.
Oh, you should.
You should. And that really, that only if you actually are prepared financially, mentally, and spiritually to raise a child, you should have a child. That's our perspective. From a perspective of if there was an unwanted pregnancy, could it be aborted? It's an individual thing. There's no religious mandate on that. And so it's not encouraged that just, use that as a form of contraception. But so contraception is definitely allowed, yes. And it's usually the woman's choice.
So wouldn't abortion though be the killing of another soul?
Good pickup. However, we believe that that the soul enters the physical body at 120 days. And so prior to that, Although the soul may be ready, it hasn't yet entered.
So that means no late eternal portions.
Well, that's up to the individual too. We don't, yeah. But that's what we also believe, that the soul enters at a later time. But, and that's why I think we don't... I think that's also why we don't say abortion is okay. To openly promote it either. Whereas IUDs and birth control pills and vasectomies, that's different.
Although that sort of frustrates the intention of the active intercourse. So the idea of making life, which means that sex is understood to be more than just for the purpose of procreation. Would it be seen in your tradition as a form of intimacy and pleasure that's legitimate?
That's right. Yeah.
So I was going to make a comment. Well, first of all, there's something similar in Judaism where the rabbis, the first 40 days, don't really consider the fetus to be of any. They say it's like water.
Right.
So that's no bearing after that. It's a different matter.
Different, I see.
And then on the topic of assimilation, which you're talking about earlier, so the Dalai Lama consulted with Jewish leaders a number of years ago to determine how Jews were successful for 2,000 years in living in a diaspora. Right? So you're struggling with issues that Jews have struggled with for a couple thousand years.
Right.
So if you ever want to chat with us about it.
Thank you.
Not that we're currently so successful, because we're having some serious issues as well.
Right.
But,
yeah.
What was my last
So hold that thought, because I wanted to say something to you. It's really interesting because that at the very first, the launch of this program, that was a question, well, why do you have to defend yourself? And I would say that if the Jews had defended themselves against Adolf Hitler and the like, the Nazis, then the Jewish religion would be the 5th largest and we would be 6th, So it's that, I don't think, and this is my own personal view, but I kind of feel as a collective, all the faiths, when you put it all together, we got it, we got it together. And that's kind of cool, that every faith has something that's so beautiful.
You made a comment in passing. So you said if a couple prays for a male child.
Right, yes.
So why would they pray for a male child? First of all, in Judaism, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
Because that would be considered a bracha levatala. It would be a blessing or a prayer uttered in vain, because you can't change the sex of the child by a prayer.
Right.
So it's a wasted, null and void prayer, which you shouldn't do. So why would people pray for a male child?
So in Indian society, a male child runs the family, right? Or perpetuates the family name as well. So that is that. And when women were not as educated and they were at home, then it's the male child who is the breadwinner. So that philosophy in the elders has persisted, and that happens. Now, with respect of you can't change anything, we believe that the power of prayer can move mountains.
So you can change the sex through prayer?
Well, you can, definitely, because the conception of the concept of that idea in the feminine divine can actually manifest miracles. So we do actually believe that can, you can actually do that. So that your prayers, whatever they may be, could be answered. But that's also divine will. So there's an intersection on that by divine will.
Okay. I want to go back to the gurus. The gurus are all male. Were they all married? I don't remember whether.
Yeah, except for the 8th Guru Harkrishan, because he was young, only 7 years old. He wasn't married.
So the others were married.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about their wives? So that would seem to me also a kind of an interesting reference point to whether the gurus walk their talk with regard to their own wives. And
Yeah, in fact, Guru Gobind Singh's wife ruled the Khalsa, the Sikh diaspora, for 40 years after his death. She issued the edicts, hukamnamas, and she actually ruled and dealt with things. So definitely, and in one of the pictures, the Divine Mother actually is placing in the baptismal, as Guru Gobind Singh is preparing the baptismal water, she is placing the sweet, the crystallized sugar in it, because he said, I'm going to create a caliber of Khalsa that will be strong and valiant and brave, stand for truth. And then she's the one who said, wait a second, we need sweetness too. And so he accepted. He said, you're right. And so she put the sweets in. So, I mean, definitely if I went into the actual, what Sikh women have done, it would have been a 3-hour talk. But even, for example, at the time of Guru Gobind Singh, when the fort of Anandpur Sahib was under besiege for 8 or 9 months, so this would have been after 1699, and 8 or 9 months, and the Hill Rajas and the Muslim emperor, their armies were attacking, and so for 8 or 9 months they had very minimal, the Sikhs that were fighting had minimal amount of food and everything, and there were a group of 40 of them who actually abandoned the Guru Gobind Singh. He said, you can leave if you write down and say, we're not your Sikhs, and I'm not your guru. And so they wrote it down and left. The 40 of them took off. And so when they arrived at their village, word got out ahead. When they arrived at their village, there was a village woman called Mai Bago. And she told all the villagers, she said, this is such a disgrace that they abandoned the guru, and how could they dare do that? And nobody should accept them back into their homes. And so those 40 men then were shunned when they came home because they abandoned the guru. And then Mai Bago said, okay, I'm going to lead you back. You 40 disgraced ones, I'm going to lead you back. So they followed under her command. And she actually fought in certain battles. And those 40 men then were martyred, or and they became the 40 liberated ones, actually. And it's all because of her hand in it all. And at that time, when Guru Gobind Singh went out in that evening to the battlefield, and he then saw the leader of the 40 liberated ones, and he said, by Man Singh, is there anything you want from me? Because he was dying. And he said, Guruji, just please tear up that piece of paper where we said we weren't your Sikhs and you weren't our Guru. And he had it in his pocket and he ripped it. And then he came upon Mai Bago, and she was wounded in that battle as well. And he was surprised. And so then his own physicians took care of her. So throughout Sikh history, there's a lot of Sikh women. In fact, Guru Nanak's sister, Bebe Nanaki, so her name was Bebe Nanaki, and Guru Nanak's sister was the first one to realize that Guru Nanak had this divine attribute in him that his parents couldn't even see. His parents were getting upset with him, and she used to tell him, no, he's different, he's special, just leave him alone. So from my perspective, Bebe Nanaki was the first Sikh. So I definitely think there are examples as well. Yeah.
Any last questions? Anyone else? I actually had just one thing. So go back to the sword again.
Right.
So in Judaism, you have the Shekhinah, the feminine indwelling presence of God.
Okay.
The divine voice is referred to as a Bat Kol. Bat is daughter, so it's a feminine voice speaking.
Yeah.
But usually the Shekhinah is associated with compassion, with nurturing, some of the same things that you discussed. But a sword is an unusual, I know you've talked a little bit about it, but it helped connect me to being feminine, because that's always associated, obviously, with men fighting.
Right. The sword is, because the sword can protect, and the sword can also destroy. And so the sword has that ability, like God-given power in that sense. And so wielding of that sword is power. And so I think from the perspective, he viewed it as the divine power on his altar of truth. So the sword represents righteousness and truth. To stand in defense of the defenseless, to stand against injustice. And, if we think of it, the scales of balance, it's always the feminine holding it. The Statue of Liberty, it's the feminine holding it. I think it is almost a universal type of concept, even though we may not enunciate it as such. I'm sure that there are and even for Mother Mary, it's now come out that, Pope John Paul really wanted to establish and canonize feminine saints, female saints, and he was a little bit restricted in doing so. So I do think, there is a whole constellation, I'll call them, of Christians who pray to Mother Mary as well. So I think it is in that regard, that ability of the feminine, of the creating and destroying. And the same way as a female, if you do good actions, you can create, but if you do bad actions, you can be very destructive. So that's what I was referring to when if God takes away your truth and kindness, then you can be very destructive.
Okay, I think that's probably all that you'll permit me. Great. Let me just thank you for wonderfully inspiring talks we've been fortunate to listen to, and appreciate the insights. I hope everyone has benefited, as I'm sure they have, in terms of understanding not only what you represent, but also help sharpen people's views of their own religious traditions and their own personal lives. So, what a wonderful way to conclude 4 talks with this particular insight into the role of women. So thank you. And we have, everyone has the next program, which is this Sunday actually. So we're going to be doing a spin on a program that we've done before, which is a fill-in program, a program on the Jewish phylacteries that are worn in prayer. So we're going to teach everyone how to wrap fill-in. But we have a unique opportunity. We're going to learn how to wrap a turban. So if you've never done that, I'm going to grow my hair really long between now and then. So it helps. But I look forward to a fascinating way of understanding the tradition by doing things. And oftentimes that's the best way to gain insights, is to actually do things. Speaking of which, we're also going to have a cooking class February 20th. So if you want to learn some wonderful Sikh vegetarian food, come and join us in the evening. We'll be at, 7 o'clock. And Dr. Singh and some other Sikh women. What about men cooking?
Yeah, definitely they do. Our minister, he was here last week actually. You missed him because he was playing the tablas. But he is a pretty mean cook. Okay, good. And he can cook for 200 people, no sweat.
All right. Yeah. Good. There's hope for him.
Yeah, definitely there is. I would just like to say I really appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to really thank the rabbi, and I'd like to thank Lil Fader as well, because as a Sikh, for me, the most important thing that I can do is encourage people to be spiritual, and be spiritual in your own practice, whatever your practice is. And so to me, this is just a wonderful mechanism of raising that awareness of spirituality globally, interglobally as well, and interreligiously as well. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And also, we do have, I think, more sessions coming up in May. And so, we'll be looking to different topics there. I will be talking, June is the commemoration of the 1984 attack on the Golden Temple. And that was a huge issue in the Sikh religion and the Sikh faith and Sikh diaspora. So I'm going to be talking about that really poignant attack that happened and talking about some of the issues behind that. But as well, I was looking at maybe talking a little bit about the art of meditation from a Sikh perspective, in looking at the technicalities. And I thought it might be nice because last class I did sing, and then normally I sing to audiences or in programs where people are not meditators normally, or they don't have their sacred language that they recite. And so somebody said to me that they enjoyed it, but didn't like the fact that I translated in the middle. And I thought that actually is really true, because you have the Hebrew text and you're reciting that, and it's kind of like our scripture. And so it would be really nice to do one class where we just sing and meditate. So I have a few ideas for our May classes as well. So I do hope that all of you will join us in May.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
We invite everyone to stay and have some refreshments, and